Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy T for 365 Horror, and this is a horror movie discovery channel. I am just here to put as many horror movies on your watch list as possible. And in today's video, we are going to be reviewing every single horror movie I watched in April. So let's get into it right now. Now, we are going to get right into the video, but before we do, I've got to remind you guys to please like and subscribe if you like this content. Also, this video is best watched with a movie tracker. I like to use Letterboxd. It's just the easiest way to keep track of the movies that you've seen and want to see. I also wanted to add that these are not deep dive reviews. The point is to just get a ton of reviews so that you can sit there with a piece of paper and write down any movie that sounds interesting to you. There are already plenty of creators who do like super deep dive, 25 minutes into one movie. So I'm going to skip that and I'm just going to go more with giving you guys a lot of titles to check out. And lastly, I wanted to give you guys the caveat. One of the viewers, I was saying caveat and he corrected me. So thank you so much. But I also wanted to make one caveat, and that is that I am looking through all of these movies through a 2024 lens. So even though some movies I will give a legacy score, I do like to give it a today's score because I just want a modern day or someone who's watching it for the first time today to know if it's good today. Now, one of the reasons I do think that's important is because take a movie like 13 Ghosts. I actually didn't watch that movie until like 2021, and because it was dated and I didn't have the nostalgia behind it, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as people who really do live and die by that movie. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I'm just saying that sometimes giving it a non-nostalgic today watch is useful for somebody who maybe doesn't have that connection to the material. So keep that in mind as we go through. These are just my opinion. And let's get into every movie I watched. Okay, so the first movie I watched was a 2012 drama horror mystery called Resolution, and I gave that movie a 5.5 out of 10. Resolution is a meh movie that did have a decent element or two. This movie has decent plot and acting with some competent comic relief, but is held back by several things. It's a pretty slow movie, and while you eventually get some light creeps and tension, it doesn't really start till like 1 hour in. What does save it is it does unfold into a decent paranormal kind of mystery that does kind of get the tension running. Unfortunately, it's just too little too late. I also thought the conclusion was alright and did leave some questions, but overall it just felt a little bit anticlimactic. Might be decent for a watch if you've seen everything. The next movie I watched was a 2023 comedy horror mystery by the name of The Conference, and I gave that movie a 6.5 out of 10. The Conference is a good slasher. I enjoyed the smart comedy that never devolved into anything too slapstick or zany. The characters are played well and the production was good. Along with that, you did get a decent little corporate corruption story played out amongst the characters that actually did keep me interested. When it came to the slasher part of the story, we did get good gore with a good variety of kills. The only downside is it does take you a little bit to get into it, but once the movie does get going and shit hits the fan, you do get a fun little slasher. The next movie I watched was a 2023 fantasy horror by the name of The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and I gave that movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. The Last Voyage is a pretty decent movie. It's a big budget horror and you can really feel it in the production and acting, which is good for a period piece like this. I enjoyed the story, and the vampire, even though it was CGI, still had some pretty creepy moments and looked decent. He was pretty menacing and brutal, which did result in some good bloody kills throughout this film. I thought it was well written with some good tragic, albeit dramatic moments. One of the only drawbacks for me was the 2-hour watch time just felt a little bit long in this one. All in all, the movie is a decent watch unless you can't stand the period or setting. Next movie I watched was a 2006 comedy horror thriller by the name of Hatchet, and I gave that movie a 7 out of 10. Hatchet is a good slasher. It has great gore and good witty humor. Although some of the minor elements are dated, it did a great job of holding up. You also get that good 80s and 90s feel with a gratuitous amount of TNA. Hatchet has some really brutal kills, and it really did make it quite entertaining. It doesn't break any real ground, but this is a great movie to throw on when you're in the mood for a grody, brutal slasher. The next movie I watched was a 2022 horror thriller named They Live in the Gray, and I gave this movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. They Live in the Gray is a pretty good, deep movie. It's a decent tale that uses its musical score to expertly build dread. You get a bit of a slow burn with this one, but what you also get is a macabre story rooted in a very real depiction of real guilt and grief. I wish it had a little bit more creeps and scares, but what it did have was actually quite potent. It's also a little bit long, but if you are in the mood for a good narrative-driven horror, check this one out. The next movie I watched was a 2023 horror mystery by the name of Sister Death, and I gave that movie a final score of 5.5 out of 10. Sister Death is an okay movie, but it's a slow burn with a mediocre payoff. They really do attempt to do something scary here, but nothing quite hits like it should. What makes this movie watchable, even though it's a semi-cliche story, is that when shit does get real in this movie, it actually is interesting, even though it doesn't happen often enough. This movie does have a decent wrap-up, and in the end, it does serve up some minor creeps and scares and an okay story. The next movie I watched was a 2017 drama horror mystery by the name of The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and I gave this movie a 7.5 out of 10. The Killing of the Sacred Deer is a really good movie. Now be warned, this is a full drama horror, so you aren't getting any real high-octane creeps or scares. But what you are getting is an excellent narrative-driven story. You get a great cast, all delivering this weird monotone dialogue and these extremely awkward interactions that are acted so well that you can actually feel the awkwardness between them. You also get an excellent story that's obfuscated and just trickled through to you throughout the length of the movie. Through a lot of it, you're often just puzzled as to what's going on, and through this amazing musical score, you feel the dread building as you wonder what the hell is going on. And you just know something bad is going to happen in this movie. Even when all is revealed, we're still left with an incredibly weighty and uncomfortable decision, and the parties knowing fate lies in the balance interact heartbreakingly. If you love drama horrors, this movie is a must-watch, and it's something that I want to have in my collection. The next movie I watched was a 2012 drama horror thriller by the name of Citadel, and I gave this movie a 5.5 out of 10. Citadel is a meh movie with some decent elements. You get some decent tension, and in many of the chase scenes, you get decent acting. The main character has agoraphobia, and his anxiety is actually played quite well. Other than that, the story was kind of meh, and the gang of feral children just looked hokey to me. The kills I also found were fairly tame. All in all, it wasn't bad, but it certainly wasn't anything good. Next movie I watched was a 2018 horror mystery thriller by the name of Luz, and I gave this movie a final score of 4 out of 10. Now, Luz is an interesting movie that's draped in problems. The first 30 minutes or so of this movie were good, and it definitely got me invested. It had interesting character interactions, and the premise seemed promising. After that, though, the movie moves into this interrogation scene where it's almost a translation of a translation, and that's where the movie really started to lose me. It ended up devolving the movie into something confusing and boring. It wasn't like primer levels of confusion, and probably is something that I could sort out, but it just wasn't compelling enough to make me care and follow. Even if you want to watch a movie that's extremely weird, I just can't suggest this one. Next movie I watched was a 2023 comedy horror mystery by the name of It's a Wonderful Knife, and I gave this movie a final score of 5 out of 10. It's a Wonderful Knife is a bit of a meh movie that just felt immature and cheesy to me. You get a bit of a Christmas Carol story, and that part was done quite well. The movie does have a good cast, and although it's not super gory, you get a decent kill variety in this one. The main problem with this movie is it just felt overall immature and forgettable. Next movie I watched was a 2023 horror mystery thriller by the name of The Bridge Curse Ritual, and I gave this movie a final score of 6 out of 10. The Bridge Curse Ritual is a decent movie with pretty good creeps and scares. The CGI on the ghosts is a little hokey, but budget-wise it's good, and some of the ghosts have very creepy looks. I wish the scares just resonated with me a bit more. Although I did enjoy the story, it took the movie from a 5.5 to a 6 out of 10. The next movie I watched, and I'm not making a mistake here, was a 1922 fantasy horror by the name of Nosferatu. And I gave this movie a 2024 score of 4, but a historical score of 7 out of 10. Nosferatu is a good historical watch. Now, for a modern audience, I'd give this movie a 4, as there is minimal creeps and scares, but as a historical watch, this movie was quite enjoyable, meaning that I was enjoying watching it for what it was, a 1922 horror movie. The current remaster was beautiful, and it was actually interesting to kind of take in the very first vampire movie, and being a silent film, it actually had a lot more dialogue than I would have thought it did. Now, I have to admit that some of my enjoyment was due to the overacting and zany facial expressions, because it's very vaudevillian, kind of just very overacted. And I did find a bit of the ending of the film kind of puzzling. But again, a great historical watch if you're in the mood. The next movie I watched was a 2024 horror mystery thriller by the name of Imaginary, and I gave this movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. Imaginary is a good to decent film. It's got some light creeps, but it's got some good jump scares. The acting is good and the story is decent. There was actually one element in the plot that got me, but other than that, it's pretty run-of-the-mill horror movie with pretty much cliche moments. The next movie I watched was a 2023 straight horror by the name of Baghead, and I gave this movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. I thought Baghead was a pretty good movie. I liked the premise and it had a plethora of creeps and scares. The Baghead creature was creepy, and I liked that they threw in a good rules-based element to the story. It's got a quick start, but it does suffer from just being a tad bit too long. At least the payoff for this movie was good, and I suggest you put it on your watch list. Next movie I watched was another 2024 straight horror by the name of Immaculate, and I gave this movie a final score of 7 out of 10. Immaculate is a good horror movie. It has good acting and a good production budget. I enjoyed the story, and it definitely builds decent mystery in the second half. I would say it has light creeps, but good jump scares, and the gore, while light, was visceral and effective. The main character is played well, and there's some pretty intense moments where her crisis acting was good and appreciated. The story wraps up well in a brutal, kind of shocking ending. Next movie I watched was another 2023 straight horror called Late Night with the Devil, and I gave this movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. Late Night with the Devil is a decent horror flick with some really good elements. First, the good. I thought it was a good, unique story with some good performances and a good 70s aesthetic. I thought the film style was good, and I enjoyed the juxtaposition of the on and off air segments in the movie. To me, some of the things that made this movie just a little bit more on the mediocre side was it kind of lacked in creeps and scares, and I thought it could have pushed what it did even further. Now, I'm sure some will say that subdued nature is what made it genius, but I felt like it just left me kind of wanting more. Overall, I did feel this movie was a slow burn that was saved by an above-average ending. The next movie I watched was another 2023 straight horror movie called Stopmotion, and I gave this movie a final score of 6.5 out of 10. Stopmotion is a decent to good film. It had good performances, and the cinematography displayed an ample budget. The doll scenes are creepy, and as the movie progresses, they grow more and more disturbing. Also, I thought that the gore, while not overdone, was effective and visceral. I even felt myself grimace a few times. The reason I wouldn't suggest this movie to everyone is because it for surely is a slower burn, so you aren't getting the high-octane creeps and scares. It's an art house style film that attempts to use character and tone to build dread rather than rely on a more high-octane scare model. The good of this movie is that if you can let it wash over you, you are treated with a story that ramps up and feels more twisted as it moves towards its conclusion. It also had an ending that for some reason just really stuck with me. The next movie I watched was a 2017 drama horror mystery by the name of Rings, and I gave this movie a final score of 6 out of 10. Now, Rings is better than I thought it would be. Being a big budget movie, you get competent acting and a good production value. The film is light to mid on creeps, but has some really good jump scares in it. Some cheesy cat jumps, but also some good legitimate ones, and they're all effective nonetheless. A good point of the story is that it's faster paced, but then to its detriment, it almost feels frenetic at times. And I somewhat get it because they're trying to push the lore forward and catch up all of this older lore for a newer audience. Because of that, I just found that the story was kind of all built on a surface level that's somewhat cliche and predictable. All in all, the movie was kind of a good popcorn watch, but you're not going to get anything deep here. And finally, the last movie I watched this month was a comedy, fantasy, horror, 2005 film by the name of Boy Eats Grl, and I gave this movie a final score of 4 out of 10. Boy Eats Grl feels like it's just below a meh movie. I swayed between a 4 and a 5, but I went with a 4 because it's a bit of a dated movie with a dated look. The setup for the story was kind of eye-rolly, but a positive I will give is that I did like that it had an interesting angle in that the main character didn't really fully know his situation, and I haven't really seen that much before. Unfortunately, the movie was below meh because all in all, it did feel forced. Alright guys, that's going to do it for another edition of every single movie I watched in April, May. I hope you enjoyed the content and the reviews, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. If I had to do a couple of picks for this one, it would probably one of the movies I would suggest is Immaculate. Just thought it was good. Also, Late Night with the Devil. I know that movie has all the hype, so you might as well go watch it. It actually is pretty good. I did like the kind of unique take. I didn't think it was groundbreaking. I'm so sorry. I know people out there are probably like, this guy don't know shit because of that, but hey, it is what it is. Everybody has their own personal taste, and I just thought it was pretty good. I'm not saying it was bad, but it just wasn't anything like I'm gonna run home, like right home or whatever, you know what I mean? But it was pretty good. Also, another movie I would suggest if you are into drama horrors, I know Hereditary and Midsommar plagues people. They hate movies like that, and so I would say to avoid this one, but if you do like that kind of deeper story-driven drama horror, check out The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Just let it wash over you. Just be open-minded about it. It is a pretty good, disturbing, edged movie, and I did enjoy it. And the last movie, if you just want some good, gory blood this month, I would suggest Hatchet. I just really liked that movie. It was funny. It was just super disgusting and grody, which is what I enjoy out of a comedy horror, so I gotta say that one definitely hit on all cylinders. Well, I gotta get out of here, guys. I want to get busy and watch a ton of more horrors, so I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.